There are times, my friends, when Disney will close down a beloved attraction, an attraction that people have enjoyed for decades in order to make way for something new. Something in the eyes of Disney that is better, a better use of the space or the theme or the building. Sometimes you'll get the mini adventures of Winnie the Pooh taking over the former home of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Other times you'll get Monstropolis taking over Grand Park and Grand Avenue, where Muppet Vision 3D once was. And people will lament the loss of their favorite attractions. However, we're not talking about that this episode. We're not talking about closed rides. We're not talking about replaced or abandoned attractions. In this episode of Offhand Disney, my friends, I wanted to unwind, to relax, and enjoy the first episode of 2025 with you by talking about some canceled Disney attractions that were in the planning phase, in development, before being swept away. Rides that started with one little spark, like many do, but the spark just wasn't strong enough to catch and become a full fire. In the first episode of Offhand Disney for the year 2025, we are going to be looking at some canceled Disney attractions that may interest you because they sure as heck interested me. And what better place to start than at Epcot? Epcot is kind of like the granddaddy of canceled and abandoned projects. There was supposed to be a movies pavilion that took you through the art of filmmaking that eventually was expanded and made into Disney's MGM, now Hollywood Studios. There was meant to be a pavilion focused on play, a pavilion that would take over the former wonders of life with interactive exhibits and character meet and greets. We never really got an attraction confirmation for the play pavilion, but it's not happening anymore, so it doesn't really matter. Now, everyone who watches this channel regularly knows that I can only go maybe about 8-9 minutes tops on this channel without referencing Living with the Land, because Living with the Land is the best attraction at Epcot, and anybody who tries to tell you otherwise is lying to your face. Okay, just keep that in mind. And Living with the Land is perfect the way that it is, but did you know we almost had something different? Something that was more of a dark ride, more of a Fantasyland style dark ride than what we ended up getting with the Living with the Land boat ride. And I'm so glad we got what we did, but just looking at the concept art for this ride, it kind of makes me wonder what it would be like if Disney decided to build this nowadays. It's very intriguing, and the concept art I'm talking about is actually over in this direction. You know, it's really hard to visualize what could be coming in the future or what we've lost in the past unless you can visualize it in, 3D physical space. That's why building models, building miniatures is a very important thing that Disney does in order to help not just their Imagineers, but their guests get a better idea of how things will be spaced out and what this area will look like when it is finally complete. Or in this case, what it would have looked like if Disney had decided to build it. Because obviously this never happened. At the D23 Expo more than a decade ago, 11 years ago, 2013, this model was on display. This is one of the original concepts for the Land Pavilion. Notice I say one of the original concepts that was designed by Tony Baxter. Met him once, it's a great time. And you can see that the whole pavilion is housed in this sort of crystalline structure, meant to be both, yes, a crystal, but also a sort of greenhouse. A glimmering greenhouse of sorts. Okay. Upon peering into this miniature of a former Land Pavilion, you may notice some golf balls suspended from the ceiling. These are very obviously golf balls, right? Or like ping pong balls, the foam sort of balls that you get from the store. They're toys. That's not the point. You're not looking at a golf ball suspended above some fake foliage. You're looking at a ride vehicle suspended over a show scene of the original attraction that was meant to be the marquee, the e-ticket of the Land Pavilion. And this ride, according to the sign right here, was called Nature's Blueprints. I've also heard it referred to as Blueprints of Nature, but the sign says Nature's Blueprints. So that's what I'm going to call it for the rest of the video, although I have heard the two being used interchangeably. Nature's Blueprints was a suspended dark ride. Think Peter Pan's flight at Disneyland or at the Magic Kingdom. Your ride vehicle was on a track that was above your head, and you would swing through these different scenes, going through different biomes and environments, exploring our planet and how all the different different biomes tie into each other and achieve, I guess, in a way, symbiosis, which is another attraction that was at the Land Pavilion that did end up getting built. But we're not talking about symbiosis in this video. We're talking about nature's blueprints. Now, if you look at the ride vehicles, they look very similar, almost in a way, to Flix Flyers. I don't know why, but they really give me Flix Flyers vibes. And I think if we had seen this attraction open in the way that we see the miniature at D23, the Land Pavilion would have been a way bigger draw than it is nowadays. Everyone goes to the Land Pavilion to experience Soarin', and then they leave, or just walk right past the magnificent, perfect attraction that is Living with the Land. What is a breadfruit? Still never figured that one out, actually. But having a themed dark ride with all of these different environments, think the first half of Living with the Land for the entire ride, sounds pretty neat. Of course, it sounds pretty neat because, well, obviously it never happened. It was canceled because the whole sort of vision for the Land Pavilion also shifted when Kraft Foods signed on as the sponsor for the pavilion. I've always said that the sponsorship structure that Epcot launched with in 1982 is a bit of a double-edged sword because yes, you have the ability to build these really neat pavilions without Disney footing the bill for construction or maintenance, and that sounds like it'd be a great thing, and sometimes it is, but it can also leave Disney in this sort of vulnerable position when the sponsor decides not to renew, in the case of places like the Wonders of Life. Or in other cases, like with the Land, it can completely change the theme of the pavilion, from being about the planet and biomes and how we all live symbiotically to being about different farming methods and agriculture, which is what the Land was when the park opened and still sort of is today. This is because Kraft Foods is not a biome company. Kraft Foods is a food company. And so in order to advertise their products, food, they would have to change the theme of the pavilion. And now we would no longer get the giant crystalline greenhouses. Instead, we received a structure that is meant to sort of visualize a volcano. And of course, leading up to that volcano, we have the fertile soil that lets people grow food with the plants and the murals. And yes, while we still do get a few different biomes in the first half of Living with the Land, it's not the overall message and theme of the attraction. Where Nature's Blueprints was about going through all of these different landscapes of the planet, now Living with the Land and formerly Listen to the Land are about how we can use all of these biomes in farming and how we are making advancements in technology in regards to agriculture. It's different. Two more things before we go though. First, I want to draw your attention to this scene where we see a hot air balloon making its way through a room with various, what I can assume are video screens showing different scenes of people in different biomes all over the world. Compare that to this right here, the ending scene, where we see scenes of people from all over the world with the various agricultural products that their countries produce. It seems like it's very much inspired by this original Nature's Blueprints concept, which I think is kind of cool. And yes, like I said, you did travel through this attraction on a hot air balloon. And what are there 4 of in the main atrium of the Land Pavilion today? That's right, my friends, 4 hot air balloons for each of the 4 seasons. And then of course 1 for the planet, but that's not a hot air balloon, that's just an inflatable Earth. Heading to Disneyland now for our second canceled attraction, we are going to go to Frontierland. Big Thunder Mountain is one of the best rides at Disneyland. If you ask a lot of people, they'll say that it's one of the best roller coasters in any of the Disney parks. Now you can argue between Paris and Magic Kingdom and Disneyland which one is the best, but my personal favorite is Disneyland. Always will be. And Big Thunder Mountain was built on top of what used to be the mine train through Nature's Wonderland. Some of the sets were even recycled for the new attraction, like the town of Rainbow Ridge is from that original version of the attraction. But when Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland was closed in order to build a faster, more thrilling version of basically the same ride, it was discovered that Big Thunder Mountain Railroad wouldn't take up as big of a footprint as the previous Mine Train. So as those spires went up, a lot of the land around the attraction was left vacant. Disney didn't quite know what to do with it. Tony Baxter, met him once, ever the creative, while designing Big Thunder Mountain, came up with an idea that would tie together the lands of Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland into one almost sort of interconnected story. And not only that, it was to be built on the vacant land that was cleared when the Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland closed. Many of you know where I'm going with this. The new land would be called Discovery Bay, the icon of which would be a massive blimp called the Hyperion that would be tethered tethered inside of an even bigger hangar. Discovery Bay would be both sci-fi and fantasy. It would draw upon the works of authors like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells to make a steampunk-style land that bridged together all of the themes and stories from all of these different lands in a way that made sense. Travel would be conducted through hot air balloons, there would be trains, there would be steampunk inventions all over the place, kinetic energy as far as the eye could see, water. All of these are very important when making a land. However, what's also really important when constructing a brand new land at the Disney parks is money. Money is very, very important, in case you haven't noticed. Eventually, the Discovery Bay idea was shelved. They never ended up moving forward with it because it would cost a lot of money. There are, however, many different attractions that were originally envisioned for Discovery Bay that did end up opening at the Disney parks, like Journey into Imagination, for example, at Epcot. Have you ever heard of Professor Marvel's Gallery of Illusion? No? I thought not. It's not a story that the Disney Parks chairman would tell you. Professor Marvel's Gallery of Illusion was meant to be an animatronic show similar to the Carousel of Progress or the Country Bear Jamboree, where we'd see different illusions on display, of course hosted by Professor Marvel and his little green dragon friend. Tony Baxter would keep workshopping the Professor Marvel character over the years. Eventually, he would become the Land Keeper, a character for the Land Pavilion for that, attraction we were talking about. The ride that would eventually become Nature's Blueprints, where the Land Keeper would guide us through this journey. Of course, Kraft then sponsored the pavilion and the entire aim of the land changed, but we've already talked about that. That's in the past. After Discovery Bay and the Land Keeper both fell through, Tony Baxter was brought on to head the Imagination Pavilion, sponsored by Kodak at Epcot. And it was here when Tony finally put his foot down and said, I am putting my whimsical, wacky professor character in a ride, so help me God. He's going and Journey into Imagination. I don't know about Land Keeper. Let's do something else. How about Dreamfinder, that's his name now. And the dragon stays, except he's purple. But then Kodak said, Tony, our logo is actually red and yellow, not purple. And so Tony said back to Kodak, all right, then just give him a sweater. Give him a sweater. I don't care. I'm putting the dragon in the ride. Cry me a river. Give him a sweater. I don't care. And so what began as an idea for a way to bring all of these different lands at Disneyland together and for an animatronic show starring a weird old man eventually became a cult classic in the hearts of Disney fans all over the world. Journey into Imagination, while not always having the longest wait time, does have its extremely dedicated fans, me included. Even though I do have to look at the Eric Idlemoon every time I ride the ride, it's still a great time. But Professor Marvel's Gallery of Illusion wasn't the only attraction that was going to be in Discovery Bay. It was going to be jam-packed. There was going to be a Nautilus simulator ride, similar to Star Tours or Body Wars, or I guess Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run if you're young and hip, based on the classic Disney live-action film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The Lost River Rapids would be a river raft ride, taking you through scenes from Journey to the Center of the Earth with dinosaurs repurposed from the Primeval World diorama, which is now on the Disneyland Railroad. I'm actually kind of glad this one didn't happen. The Spark Gap Loop, which you can see pictured here, would be a bit of a smaller roller coaster because keep in mind, Big Thunder Mountain took up a lot of the Nature's Wonderland footprint, so the roller coaster couldn't be huge, but it was based on like Tesla coils and energy generation. And it looks like it'd be outdoor, which of course more kinetic energy equals better land. And then the marquee e-ticket attraction called Island at the Top of the World, based on the movie of the same name, a movie that failed at the box office, which is another reason why Discovery Bay was never built. Guests would journey aboard the Hyperion to find the lost civilization of Astrogard in the Arctic. Now, obviously, none of this ever happened, but like I said with Journey into Imagination, a good idea never truly dies, and Discoveryland at Disneyland Paris was absolutely 1000% a spiritual successor to Discovery Bay. I mean, they even got the word Discovery in the title. What more do you need? And, would you look at that? The Hyperion blimp tethered inside of a massive hangar. Almost like that was meant to be the icon of Discovery Bay over in Anaheim. How curious. Weird how things work, Tony. So while Discovery Bay may have been canceled and, let's face it, is never really going to be revived, at least it lives on both in our hearts and in scattered attractions all throughout the world. Now for this next one, funnily enough, we're actually staying exactly where we are now. We're staying at Disneyland, but we're also staying in that transition area between Fantasyland and Frontierland, nowadays known as Big Thunder Trail. Not necessarily as far back as Galaxy's Edge or Big Thunder Ranch, but just the Big Thunder Trail area, because there was a drop tower ride that was originally envisioned not for Disney California Adventure, not for Disney's Hollywood Studios, but for Frontierland at Disneyland. And yes, I'm talking about a drop tower in the same way that the Tower of Terror is a drop tower, or that new Spider-Man ride they're going to build in Hong Kong, I believe, is also going to be a drop tower ride. That one has me interested. This is not Spider-Man themed, it's not old Hollywood themed, of course, it's in Frontierland. This ride was known as Geyser Mountain. Not Big Geyser Mountain, just regular Geyser Mountain. Probably smaller than Big Thunder. Otherwise, they just call it Thunder Mountain. But the twist was this, my friends, where other attractions like the Tower of Terror or Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout have you falling down these big elevator shafts, the whole gimmick for Geyser Mountain was going to be shooting up these elevator shafts, or at least riding on top of a geyser really fast in an upward motion. It wasn't the drops that were providing the thrill, it was the ascent. However, unlike Discovery Bay, there is not a ton of surviving concept art for Geyser Mountain. The only piece I could find online was this. Here we have what appears to be a blueprint for a structure that was built around the geyser, very, very tall in a similar fashion to the Tower of Terror. But of course, it would be themed to fit in with the story of Frontierland and Big Thunder Mountain, and even, to an extent, like Discovery Bay, Fantasyland. Now, according to Jim Hill, back in 2003, the Disney Imagineers had been sort of kicking this idea around a few years prior, so just around 1999, 98, 2000. So well after Discovery Bay. It seems like even after opening Big Thunder Ranch and Big Thunder Barbecue that Disney wasn't really quite satisfied with how they were utilizing the space. Now I gotta be clear, this piece of concept art that I showed you a bit earlier was allegedly for a Disneyland Paris version of the attraction, but I imagine the designs didn't shift too much between Disneyland Anaheim and Disneyland Paris. It's the first time I've ever called it Disneyland Anaheim. Although this ride had some major differences from the Tower of Terror and Mission Breakout, because it was definitely more of a dark ride drop tower fusion, more so than even the Tower of Terror. The ride would lead us through different show scenes, some of which were inspired by what came before, the Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland. For example, we would pass through an area that was very much inspired by the Rainbow Caverns during our trip through Geyser Mountain, and there was a whole storyline that went along with it. The queue and some of the show building for Geyser Mountain would be housed inside of the home of the man who was responsible for building all of the machinery that made it possible for the miners to excavate over at Big Thunder Mountain. Think of him as the wacky old inventor behind all of the machinery the Big Thunder Mining Company used. We board our ride vehicles that were meant to look like giant drills before making our way into Geyser Mountain at last. After riding through and past different scenes inspired by Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, we arrived at the top of the mountain, with only a swaying, ancient, beaten down wooden rope bridge leading us to the other side of the mountain to safety. Of course, there's nowhere else we can go but forward, and once we get right to the middle of the bridge, the geyser erupts, sending all of us shooting skyward, the reverse of the Tower of Terror, and then a few bounces similar to Mission Breakout would follow. And then, thanks to the geyser, we would land on the other side of the chasm, make our way back down the mountain, back to the station, and then obviously you gotta exit out the gift shop, right? This was Eisner. This is peak Eisner. Now, all of this is according to Jim Hill, who personally took a tour of WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, back in 2003, and has stated that they did have pieces or an entire miniature of Disneyland's Geyser Mountain. That he did see. He saw it with his own two eyes, and I don't think there are any surviving pictures of it, at least right now on the internet. I'm not sure if it's still at Imagineering, or if it's in the archives somewhere, or if it has sadly just ended up in the garbage and is now rotting away in a landfill. Either way, apparently this did really exist, and there's not a lot to go off of it now, but back in the early 2000s, this was very, very close to getting greenlit. Now, why wasn't Geyser Mountain built? Like a lot of other entries on this list, and a lot of other just canceled Disney attractions in general, it came down to money. Disney didn't want to fund the expansion and improvement of Frontierland, to build a whole new e-ticket attraction that is brand new from the ground up, non-IP, just right there in between Fantasyland and Frontierland. And they actually wouldn't put the money back into the area of Disneyland until Star Wars Galaxy's Edge started construction. And nowadays, I think, obviously, they're getting a lot of use out of that previously sort of empty area. But back then, they just weren't sure they really wanted to commit to this e-ticket drop ride rise ride, hop up geyser ride. What would you call it? Ascension ride? And so Geyser Mountain was shelved, canceled entirely, and is relegated to the bowels of Disney internet fans. Now you and I both know about Geyser Mountain, and good gracious, I wish they would revisit this concept because it sounds so cool. Plus, it's an original IP. It's not based off of anything. It's a brand new original Disney Parks attraction, and I think that sounds really cool. By no means is this a complete list of every canceled Disney attraction. I've made videos on some of them before, and of course there are still more that I haven't covered. So if this topic interests you and you want to hear more about canceled Disney attractions, lands, and even theme parks, leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Also, what did I miss in this video? Are there any attractions that you really want to hear me talk about? What is your favorite canceled Disney attraction? Is it Miss Piggy's re-theme of Superstar Limo that was apparently going to happen at some point at California Adventure? That's true. I think it's really interesting looking back on canceled rides and attractions because it gives you an insight as to where Imagineering was creatively at the time. Geyser Mountain was an original non-IP e-ticket thrill ride meant for Frontierland. It was definitely going to boost the capacity of Frontierland at Disneyland. Name all of the rides in Frontierland. Technically, there's 2, the Mark Twain and Big Thunder Mountain. Wait, 3, how could I forget the Columbia? Oh, also, hold on, how could I forget the Davy Crockett Explorer canoes, even though that's almost completely in Bayou country now? I think it's still technically a Frontierland ride. Nope, I just checked, it's Bayou country, take it off the list! Imagine adding another e-ticket to that lineup. And you know, although the capacity issue has been fixed now with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, back then Discovery Bay seemed like a no-brainer. We needed something back there, it's so much unutilized space. And I think it'll be interesting looking back in 10, 15, 20 years as to what attractions were canceled nowadays. Obviously, we know about Mary Poppins, and a lot of the Epcot things were canceled because of COVID and budget cuts, but now I'm wondering what they're working on, you know, today, tomorrow, that will be canceled later on down the road. It's very interesting to me. Huh? What's that? No hairdresser budget anymore. Okay, I guess I'll just change this up a little bit. Okay, and action. And you know what? Speaking of, I guess speaking of budget cuts, it looks like our green screen budget has been cut. So no more green screen effects for the rest of the video. I must have gone over for this one. And oh, hold on. I'm getting a message here on my offhand device. Yeah, oh, okay, turns out the budget is being slashed even more, everybody. We now have to make this show on a budget of $0. So I don't even know if we can afford this green cloth. I think we might have to move somewhere else. Okay, here we are reporting to you all from the new Offhand studio. You can see I had to downsize my microphone a little bit, but I got my trusty ring light and we're here in the studio so I can say thank you all for watching. I really liked making this video about old canceled Disney attractions. And maybe someday, some of these attractions, not all of them, maybe not even any of them, will be revived, and there goes the lights. All right. It's getting a little low budget in here, so I'm just gonna go and wrap it up by saying maybe someday we'll get Geyser Mountain. Probably not, but you never know. And it's getting dark. It's getting even darker. The lights are out in here. How is it getting darker? Boy, I sure hope we fade back into the end card. That's the only thing that could save me right now. Oh, okay, and I should have the budget to throw up the graphic there. Okay, thank goodness, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this video on canceled Disney attractions. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the like button, and if you're new around here, like I said, if you want more videos like this one, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. Got a Disney trip coming up, so a very big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You will all be receiving a special, exclusive Offhand Disney video for every tier. If you want to join their ranks and get access to that exclusive video, just $1 a month will get you that access. So like I said, thank you to all of you on Patreon. If you want to join their ranks, the link will be down in the description below. However, if you'd rather follow me for free, I'm on other social medias like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all of those at Offhand Disney. Makes it easier to find me. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to let me know your favorite canceled Disney attraction down in the comments below. Maybe Western River Expedition, or maybe the predecessor to Superstar Limo, where it was going to be a paparazzi chase. That got changed, obviously, because of events in the world at the time, Princess Diana. Maybe it was the Disney Sea that was for Long Beach and not for Tokyo. Let me know down in the comments because, like I said, I really like looking into these topics and making videos about them, going into the dark, deep recesses of the internet to find all of these sources. It's a great time. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing everyone here in the next one for the second video of 2025. Ooh, goodbye.